Every day, we at FinHealth are engaged in the amazing field of healthcare, where incredible drugs and techniques are being introduced to prolong and enhance the quality of life for our friends and families. Unfortunately, we also witness firsthand a very dark side of that business equation, where a small but growing number of healthcare providers are engaging in deceptive and unconscionable billing practices, affecting the most vulnerable members of our population. The first example is that of a young 12-year-old patient named Corey who was started on a monthly regimen of Stelara at a children's hospital. Stelara at that time had a market price of about $3,500 per monthly infusion. Despite that going rate for Stelara, the children's hospital charged about $20,000 for each monthly infusion, costing the employer health plan an additional $400,000 over a 3-year period. The situation we uncovered was so egregious that we at FinHealth assumed the hospital would sheepishly acknowledge the situation as a billing error and enable the employer to recoup the funds back into the plan. After all, this was the local children's hospital, whose mission it was to improve the life of every child, with accountability being one of their 5 core values. But no, the hospital would not return repeated calls from us or the employer, and ultimately the patient outgrew the medication. Unfortunately for the employees in the health plan, that $400,000 misappropriated from their coffers resulted in premium increases in future years just to cover those ridiculously inflated costs. The second example has a better ending, but is perhaps even more disturbing, as it relates to a life-saving cancer drug called Avastin. A young patient named Emma was started on a regimen of Avastin delivered monthly by a technician in a 1 to 2 hour infusion to treat her aggressive cancer. The drug carried a market price of about $8,000 per monthly infusion. Despite that lofty price tag, the hospital decided that a fair price for them to collect would be an inflated $48,000 for each monthly infusion, over 6 times the market price, costing this health plan an additional $480,000 per year. Ultimately, this story had a happier ending. While no money was recouped to the plan, the employer did decide to take a more proactive approach and capped their monthly reimbursement at $11,000, still a generous margin to the hospital for an $8,000 drug. Fortunately, the employer, with the support of FinHealth as an advisor, was willing to take a stand on principle. The third and final example resulted in a whopping $900,000 savings to a plan for 10 home infusions administered to a 53-year-old female named Barbara, receiving eculizumab to treat her rare blood disorder. The drug's market price is at $27,000 per infusion, so 10 infusions should cost $270,000, right? Not so fast. The provider marked up the medication 392% to $104,000 for each of the 10 infusions this patient received during a 6-month period. That is a $77,000 markup per infusion. Fortunately, FinHealth was able to illuminate this issue with the plan administrators, which resulted in the patient's care being transferred to a more cost-effective site of care. And the plot thickened on this episode of care. The provider hospital was not happy about the employer flagging the excessive charges on a prepayment basis and only sending them a fair reimbursement of $27,000 per infusion. Provider has since reached out to the carrier threatening legal action as carrier is not adhering to their negotiated terms. Provider hopes to collect the $900,000 shortfall from either the carrier or the employer. Perhaps the most disturbing detail of this last example story was the reaction from the greedy CFO of the hospital, proudly declaring, "We can charge whatever we want." Would they then knowingly be stealing $1.2 million from the local employer's health plan? That's not clear either, as the carrier is unwilling to share the details of their contract. In reality, we do not know. Is the carrier perhaps underpaying the provider on their Medicare Advantage program, with local self-funded employers expected to make up the difference? Due to the diligence of the employer, however, the carrier cannot readily look the other way on this injustice. If our employer client is ultimately sued to collect the balance due, these monies will need to be made up via an additional $900K plus in premiums paid by those local employees. If pursued in the legal arena, this could be an important day of reckoning for that well-known hospital health system and their carrier partner. They need to choose their next step carefully. The hospital certainly will rationalize this bad behavior, The hospital is a non-profit entity enjoying all the tax breaks associated with such status. Yet you would think it is a struggling, fledgling business just trying to get by. We get underpaid by the federal government on Medicare Advantage, so we have no choice but to overbill employers and their health plans. But they do have a choice. They could perhaps run the hospital more like a business, with a focus on quality and efficiency of services delivered. They could stop erecting fancy glass buildings that look more like resort hotels, despite suffering with existing overcapacity. Maybe they could negotiate better prices for the supplies where it appears they get charged 10 different prices for the same item. They may wish to consider activity-based costing to get a better handle on exactly how inefficiently they are run. How about they invest a little of their earnings from their 340B program back into lowering the cost of care for their most vulnerable population? Finally, they may wish to consider reducing their private equity portfolio, often made up of money-losing companies that they lack the expertise to properly oversee. So, yes, you do have the choice to do the right thing, but will you? FinHealth comes across examples like these regularly. We analyze your healthcare spending and provide guidance and advice on how you can recover from overcharges and questionable billing practices. The healthcare industry will not do enough to regulate itself, so we are here to protect your privately funded healthcare plans. Find us at finhealth.com.